حور العين تناديني فدعيني أماه دعيني لتبكي دموعك يا أمي عن دربي لا لن تثنيني حور العين تناديني فدعيني أماه دعيني لتبكي دموعك يا أمي عن دربي لا لن تثنيني.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Let's make dua inshallah. Let's start. Allahumma ameen, Allahumma tassalam, minka salam, tabarakta ya dhal jalali wal ikram. Allahumma salli ala sayyidina wa shafi'ina wa habibina wa maulana Muhammad wa barik wa sallam. Allahumma rabbana zidna ilman nafi'a wa amalan mutaqabbala wa rizqan wasi'a wa shifa'a min kulli da'. Allahumma nas'aluka al-huda wa tuqa wal afafa wal ghina. اللهم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار فسبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Inshallah, today we want to continue our topic Islam and Muslims in the modern world, and the part or section that we are dealing with is challenges faced by youths in the modern societies. We looked at Western world trend mixed with new Muslim trends. And we're saying that our youths today, that they are faced with the challenge of a society that they're born and grew up in. So you can't tell a youth or a young man, second generation or third generation Muslim, born in a society like the Western society, only of Islam, because we bred him, bring him up, send him to school, send him in an environment with his Western, everything that is Western, and telling him you have to be what? Just be Muslim and use Western on one side. So it's almost difficult to put that youth or that child or that person, that individual on a situation where he or she has to face that situation of choosing sides. In other words, wearing two hats at the same time. It's very difficult to wear that two hats at the same time. And that's what our youths are today. It's challenging for them. So yes, we want the best for them, but we must know what is best. And sometimes we mix up what our Islam is as to oppose what Islam allows. You know, our cultural aspect of it as opposed to what Islam gives allowance to. The fact is that we must always bear in mind that the first place that the Muslims ever went to when they wanted to seek refuge and protection was in a non-Muslim land. And they survived and they were protected and they lived there. And in fact, when the migration took place from Abyssinia, the Sahabas who were there, the companions and persons who were there, remained there even after the migration until they really decided to leave. But they were kept in a very warm and welcoming situation in that time. So it is nothing new for Islam to survive in a non-Muslim environment. The fact is that if you're born and grew up in a society like this, it is not something strange to Islam. Islam is not something that is purported or what has been branded about by media, that it is something that is far-fetched. You know, sometimes people make this statement, go back where you come from. Well, we ain't come from nowhere else but here. We belong here, we grow here, we live here, we educate our children here, we are part of this here, we are citizens here. So it is nothing about changing this. This is what we are, and this is our religion, and every religion has an equal right and place. Now, for our youths is what we are challenged about, what we want to hold on to as for Islam for our children, and what aspect of it that we want to be concerned about. So when we look at it with the Western trends, or the world trends, Western world trends, and the new Muslim trends, we have to understand how that blends or mesh in together, and yet we can live as Muslims. So looking at that, we come to the point where we say that the entire Muslim world is made up of 57 Muslim countries. That's basically what the Muslim world image is like. And there are around 500 universities, which we mentioned last class at this point. On the other hand, there are 5,758 universities in USA alone, and 8,407 universities in India in research done by the UNDP in 2004. And that was way back then. That's almost 15 years ago almost, that we would have this happening. Not one university in the entire Muslim world was featured in the top 500 ranking universities in the world. Literacy in the Western world, predominantly Christian, is 90%, whereas literacy in the Muslim world is 40%. Furthermore, 98% of these predominantly Western countries completed at least primary education, whereas 50% of Muslim countries completed primary education. Similarly, 40% of Western countries attended university, whereas only 2% of Muslim countries attended university. Now, understand this. Muslims are the ones in the early part of this part of intervention into the world of university, were the first to build a university. We were the leading in education and in systems was set up by the Muslims. And to tell ourselves from then, in that era time, 2004, that only 2% of the Muslims are on that level of tertiary education, whereas different parts of the world, they are bordering on 40 and 50% tertiary education, university level education. This tells a big picture about what our situation is. We have to understand what is happening in the Muslim world and what is happening in our Western world. Now, many of us who are in the Western world, we don't see this. And we won't think this has been something strange. Why? Because we bring up our children in the Western world and they go to university just like every other child in the Western world. We pay for the university. In fact, we have very outstanding Muslim children who grow up to be professional in our society. So we cannot tell ourselves, that we did not educate our children. How is this possible? Yes, we take full advantage because this is what is privileged to us. This is what is before us, the level of freedom and opportunities that are given to us in the Western world for our Muslim children to be educated. And nothing is wrong with that. Never we should think that their education and giving them an Islamic or a secular education, anything is wrong with that, because Islam gives us that allowance for our children to be educated. But what is of concern is why did the Muslim world children does not have that level of education. And that is very important for us to realize. Why did that part of the world remain the way they are and did not go forward? And we must think and understand and rationalize why they remain like that. And that is something that is glaring, that what has happened to the Muslim world is that after colonization by the Christians and controlling and brutalizing the Muslim world over the years that had went by in that time after, a couple hundred years ago, they have never stopped doing that. And the fact is that they have not given the opportunities, and the children not given the opportunities, because the governments and the systems that were set up by these countries were not systems that would allow them to have privilege and freedom as they used to have before. In other words, these are not just a monarchy or a kingship alone that they have now, but they are dictatorial kingships and leaders that are placed there that controls them. In other words, when we read lower down, we'll see what is the reasoning behind it. That the Muslim majority countries have 230 scientists and in every 1 million people, whereas the US alone has 5,000 scientists in every 1 million. Now that is a big difference. Muslim countries spend on research 0.2% of their GDP, whereas Western countries spend 5% of their GDP on research. There is a huge gap on the number of sick people to the number of doctors. For example, in Indonesia, there is about 10,000 patients for every one doctor, whereas in Spain, there is about 500 sick people for every one doctor. In 1995, the average yearly income per citizen in Pakistan was $300, whereas in Britain it is $12,000. In US, this is calculated. You see the level of disparity in terms of even wealth earning registered in this condition that is, so we look at the entire situation here and we tell ourselves why it should be like this. So we could see how glaring it is that even in that part of the world, yes, we call it the Muslim part of the world, and that's why it's recognized by everyone. But this is the condition of it. And you look at Africa, you look at third world countries, they are always kept under this type of control. This control is not a leash by a chain or a grip of somebody putting a shackle around our necks or our feet or our hands, but it's a shackle of control by way how things are being given. And one of the biggest controls is education. if we do not have an educated Muslim society, I mean worldwide in the Muslim world, then where is our opportunities and our thinking and our benefit going to be relied upon? In other words, these young men in that part of the world which is war-stricken, they are easily what? Looped into terrorist activities. They're looped into activities that people pay them a little sum of money for to be in. And that tells the picture of what is depressing of what is happening in that part of the world. So even if they resist, the army just come and arrest them, take them away. They can be killed. That is the nature of what that part of the world is like. And we as Muslims must recognize that that is the failure of what we are seeing today for the love of wealth. But nonetheless, let's look further than this and understand what is the essence of this. The majority of the responsibility for this, or the majority of the responsibility for this lack of human development in Muslim countries is to the blame on Muslims themselves. That is the first thing. That we have not stand on a united force or ground. So don't blame everybody else, but blame ourselves that our children in that part of the world have not been educated as they ought to be educated. The fact is that I'm not saying that no one is educated in that part of the world. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the percentage of people that should be privileged to education at a higher level, whether in the poverty line or the lower line, that certain amount of resources from the governments and the leaders should be spent on those poorer people so that they can be elevated. And that's part of what Islam is about, that we look after those who are in need. That was taught us by the Prophet ﷺ, that we look after those people who are in need. So if we have youths in that part of the world are like that, then it is the responsibility of the Ummah, the Muslims, to look after these people. And that is one of the reasons why we have this low level of education. So after all, these are their countries and their affairs. It is their responsibility. And we're not saying that, well, they're so poor that they can't do anything. That is not the case. But they keep their people like that. And that is the difference. Because if we tell ourselves that the Arab world is poor, we can never say that, because most of the oil that is produced comes from that part of the world as well and sold. However, what is shocking is the hypocrisy and the double standards by the UN and that policy towards these countries, that there are many sanctions from over and over. Certain sanctions will take place that will also not affect just the government, but it affects who? When sanctions are placed, the people who really starve are the poor people, the ones who require education, the ones who require health care. These are the ones who really suffer. The well-to-do will always send their children abroad and will send them to get better education, but the ones who are the grassroots at the lowest level are the ones who really suffer. So when we look at the situation, why the Muslim youths are in the world are in the condition that they are in, this is one of the biggest effects, education. So even though the condition of majority of the Muslim countries are the same, we will take, for example, one country, Egypt, has been led by one president Hosni Mubarak, who many of us would have known. But under this condition, what will happen? Anyone ever lead and try to lead after him? They never had an opportunity to what? Take leadership. Until today, that country is still, grappled with this level of fear that no one can oppose the leader. Why? That is not democracy. And in many of these other lands, it's not like that. Why we are saying this? And that is a direct result of what is happening to the people in that part of the world for education. Now, we ask ourselves, when that uprising took place recently, a couple of years ago, it was because the youths wanted that change, but they couldn't get that change. They got an exchange for an ex-dictator. There's something different. And and that led to an exchange, not really a change. So they were involved in an effort to change and get democracy, but they couldn't get that. And many parts of the world, war took place further to that and caused further destruction in that part of the world. So our youths face this challenge in the Muslim world. Our youths face this challenge of education. And being bombarded by this is only one aspect of it, because this leads to a different problem, because they cannot see their way that no one in their environment is helping them. We have youths even in our own communities who are Muslims, whose families are poor, and we ourselves sometimes overlook their needs. The Muslims in our own community sometimes overlook the needs of poor Muslim families in our community. The only time we give them something is when Ramadan will come and we have zakat money to give. We find trying to look for people to give zakat to. But that's the time when it's heightened. Or that's the time when you feel that the only time they have need. And sometimes we only look at, if you see they have a little car or a little house, we are giving them no zakat whatsoever because we feel that they don't need anything. Why don't they sell the car? Why don't they give away this instead? So that they can survive. We don't think otherwise. That is the condition of our mentality even towards our own people here. Far less a country that has that level of what? Destruction towards youths. So what do you expect for youths to do? To be motivated by that level of what? Pushback and the level of resentment that we are showing towards them and the level of, poor level of love and encouragement that is shown towards them. Do you expect anything to come out of that situation? This is what we are seeing. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has given us that ability and that privilege to live amongst people, whether they are Muslims or non-Muslims. And we know even in our Muslim society that is the condition of what we are seeing here today. One of the things that we must know is that no matter what our children study from sciences, secular studies, or Islamic studies, they are both encouraged to do that. And that is what us school, whether it be the Islamic school, they should be teaching their children as well secular education, because they are, especially in a Western society where we grow up like this, and even in those non-Muslim, in those Muslim countries, they should also have that, because they are also going to develop their children to work and fill the void that Islam really needs to be filled. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ أَسْمَعَ كُلَّمَا ثُمَّ عَرَضَهُمْ عَلَى الْمَلَائِكَةِ فَقَالَ أَنْبِئُونِي بِأَسْمَائِهِ. Allah taught Adam the names of the things and the operation of the earth, the affairs of the world. What we are talking about here? The world, the material aspect of life was taught to Adam, and then he was told to tell it to the angels. Tell them about it. What is that telling us? It's telling us about the science of the world. It is telling us about the knowledge of the world, that Muslims, as Muslims, we ought to know that. As Muslims, we ought to know that. That's a simple ayat, but we just can't take the ayat to mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say, we'll just teach Adam and that's an inherent thing. No, it is much more than that. It is telling us here that the knowledge of this world must also be understood from us. The fact is that we eat. We have to get that food from somewhere. We have to work. We have to mind our children. We have to do all of these things. So it is not that we are restricting ourselves from this. We should be part and parcel of this. And that is found in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 31. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells Adam and tells him to learn, and he informs him about this world and this creation. So it's not that what we are learning about this world, there are many mentality about our children, and some people are of two different type of things. Sometimes with Muslims we really can't get the hold of, is that sometimes we are on the extreme on the other side. Someone say, I don't care about my children. I don't make sure my children have a proper sound secular education, because if they can't get a job, at least when they study and they get a degree, they can do something. On the other hand, others will say, well, all they need is to have what? Islamic education. Once they have that, they will be good. But that's not what we are taught in the Quran. That is not what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran. That we need all of it, from the world and from the Quran. In fact, the Quran teaches us about the world as well, about the affairs of the world, and the running of trade and business and all different aspects of things. So we cannot tell us that the Quran only teaches us about the worship of Allah in respect of that, but in fact it tells us how to live our life in this world using the things of this world, the benefits of this world that we will get for the life of the hereafter. So we must know about how to use what we have here so that we can benefit ourselves for the hereafter. So all of it is for us, but we must understand how to utilize it. Otherwise we'll abuse it and not understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants out of it. So this is the concept of learning in Islam, but where we are and what is happening amongst us. So it is evident in major Arab cities, and this is one of the things, where American style shopping malls and pop culture mix with Western influence, Arabic music and Islamic calls to prayer. all of this going on there. It's like almost seeing the West in the East. And we see that here as well. The fact is that even in the West, Islam is dominant. It is also known, in fact, amongst many of the non-Muslim environment that we are living here in the western part of the world. Do we hear the azan call out loud? And we have what? Non-Muslims hearing the azan as well. Some of them may complain at times early in the morning, but most people get accustomed and even compliment. They say, this azan wake me up in the morning to start to get up early to go to work. They are coming for Fajr, but at least they say what? We get up in the morning to go to work early. Like that's the alarm clock in the morning. That's our alarm clock, the adhan in the morning. So even the non-Muslims get accustomed to this time to wake up in the morning and are accustomed to it. But we live in an environment like this, and we created this environment. We build this environment. So imagine if we haven't done that, what would it be the Islamic feeling and environment created? Even the adhan builds an environment that we might think that, well, we are small in number, but that adhan makes a difference in the entire community. In the entire community, some message of Islam has been spread. So, they accept it. And that is what we see, that there is a room for us, even in a society like this. But however, we are also seeing that the trends of the Western culture also taking its roots in the eastern part of the world, where the adhan was the only thing to be heard. Now you're hearing what? Music, you're hearing different types of things taking different parts of the world, in the eastern part of the world. So, what are we going to do? Tell them that they can't do that? Or what level of it that they should allow, what level they should not allow? That is now a society that is integrating with a whole level of bombardment of things that they have never been accustomed to. In our society, the people grow into acceptably living together, and especially in the Caribbean part of the world, where we all came together and live together and know these things for all of our life. The European part of the world is the same thing. And even in the Park continent, is the same thing. They grow into that environment of Islam. So here, there is a tremendous attraction to Western pop culture. You have tens of thousands of young Arab and Muslim men who are basically dressed in Western clothes, carrying American and European mobile phones, talking about Western musics. Right? When you're going for Hajj, you also see everybody what? Flashing all over the place. I think this year they wanted to put a ban on the flashing, again with the phone flash and cameras and stuff. But you think about it, in the whole of that part of the world, that's just about one part of the Arab world. But everywhere you go, this is the norm. This is what they are accustomed to. They have grown into this. So if that part of the world can actually, be Islam, so tell us something about Islam. Islam doesn't what? Knock off everything and say what? Haram, 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 just throw out everything. No. Islam is not like that. That's why Islam fits into our Western society, and Islam and everything from the Western society that can be taken and put into there, as you mentioned in the very beginning, that Islam took the books of the European part of the world, took it to the Arab world, worked on those books and made libraries and universities and developed them and bring back new things and science to the what? European world. Because Islam allows that. Islam gives us that privilege. So our youths must never think that Islam was something strange to anything that we see around us. No. What is the haram part about is the thing that Allah has made haram, that all other religions also what? Could tell you that these things are wrong. So that is the other part that we didn't talk about. But we're talking about here what the globalization is about, what is the bombardment that we are seeing happening, what should we resist and what should we accept for our children. Here, globalization is also producing the heightened sense of Islamic identity, and in return to Islam is a defensive response to the onslaught of globalization that's seen by most Muslims to be threatening their identity. This is the fear that some people will have. Long ago, for example, in our society, our sisters used to dress their headgear of what? Hijab or orni? Orni. We know the orni is a thin piece of cloth, you could see everything through it. over the years, what we have seen happen, 30, 40 years, we're talking too long ago, 40 years ago, from then to now, most of the sisters now will wear what? Hijab. And there are different types of hijabs. And they have grown accustomed to this. So they have brought something into our deen and added to its value. So, and they are accustomed with it now. So it is not like we have lost Islam. In fact, you can see that there's some more benefit to it. Now, our youths is a different thing. Notice we reach a certain age in life that we can say, well, we wear clothes like this. Now we see them wearing clothes in a different fashion. The older people will be what? They're kind of upset from what we have read. They say, look, they've come to Islam, they get too involved in the religion. But the fact is that they have only reached where they're supposed to reach. We are only where we are, that we are supposed to reach with our Islam, because our education and our growing knowledge has put us in that position. Right? Now, is where do we want to see our children grow more in deen, and how much we want to see that they fit into the society that they live in. Remember, the society continues to change around us. So, what are we going to do? Say that Islam does not allow for these changes. Whether we like it or not, it's going to happen, because Allah is the one who is in control of the time. Allah is in control of the condition that is before us. The test is more, the trials are more. Everything is going to be different. So how well we equip our children to face these challenges is what we are talking about. So don't blurt out in our minds that you see your child dressed in a particular way and you get vexed. Because just remember what our parents would have actually went through at the same time in terms of our own dress. So in respect of that, we say that even the threatened identity that they are fear of, we will see that a very large segment of the people who make up these organizations are younger now today. Not necessarily below the age of 16, but younger members of society, those of the within in their mid-20s, 21, 22, 23, 25, 30. That is the strength of any Muslim community now. Any Jamaat that you go to, the majority of them will be that age. In the Muslim world, it's the same thing. So, what you're going to expect, that you will be able to put into them some values that they don't see eye to eye with you with, or they see Islam, because of now today, information about Islam and Muslims, you think the Imam or I could convince them just so easy? That they had to read a book or to give them a paper to read? No. They just stick up their phones, and the information that they can get may be misleading. Some might be truth, some might be valuable, because that's a different story altogether. But what I'm saying is the opportunities for education and their understanding is far different to our time. So you can't just give them something and say they go swallow a whole pill and take it just so. No. The youths of our time and our children in this time and age, they are different. The fact that many of them who are swindled off by us and who went into different parts of the world to go and fight from different parts of the world, they were taken because of what? Internet and these things. They were taken and souped into believing that fighting and going abroad in terrorism action so on is what put them there. Sometimes the parents didn't know until they what? Reach across there. Right? They didn't know. But that is the danger that we face. That is the danger we face at our present time. So, yes, they will not just accept what you and I give them. But that's why we have to change our attitude towards them and bring them closer to us in a different relationship. You see, the phone and the internet cannot give them that relationship. It gives them and feed them information that they might be wanting to. But if you could share your values with our children, that's a different thing. So the relationship that we go into, if we run away them from the masjid, or we push them away from the masjid, they have an next source to get the information from. So they're not worrying about you so much as before. So we tell ourselves that what we are seeing in society today, and what we're seeing amongst our Muslim community today with our youths, their challenge is a far greater challenge, because they are no longer knit. In other words, you're throwing a cast net and covering all of them there and say, oh, you can't run no way. No. Because even in the cast net or in the society that you live in, they could be in your own bedroom, in your own house, and you don't know which part of the world they're in. That is how dangerous it is. who they are communicating with, who they are talking, what they are looking at. All of that is a media bombardment we'll talk about. But for us to get the gauge of what is happening with our youths, the level that they are at, and the condition that they are facing. So population of, that is the age of them, the young population of these young people, puts tremendous pressure on the economy to be able to provide jobs, adequate employment, and employment at sufficient living wages for those people. The youths today, long time we could buy a bread and a piece of thing and survive on that. You think that's all they want? No, they want a $5,000 phone. They want some expensive this and some expensive that, and they want everything today costs money that they want. So, as I mentioned before, when in a house long ago, you have one telephone. Now it have 5, 6. Right? So the cost factor has changed. Each of your child want what? A phone. And that is the nature of what the expense continue to be at. So when they are working in a job, you think they're only studying to come and bring home money for you? No, they want to fix all these personal necessities that they have. And the personal necessities that they have today, as opposed to the fellas long time and the girls long time, is two different things. Now, clothing was a need long time. Today, clothing is a style. It is two different things. So you get the picture. You understand what you're getting at? This is the nature and the condition that we are facing. So obsessive consumerism is what we're talking about. That they want everything that they see. A phone come out next week. They dump this old one and they buy a new one. And it's within an appetite of the young Muslims in the tiniest and the poorest neighborhoods in the Muslim world. So even in the poorest countries, they have access to these things. They are bombarded by these level of things and they want it. So how do we satisfy rising consumer expectations in declining economies in the Middle East and all parts of the world? The fact is, today we hear about Dubai. You know Dubai? We call it what? We call it like a Muslim part of the world, Muslim world. But it is more like what? Even far away better. It is ranked within the first 5 top countries for tourist destination. It has wealth in great capacity. They have over $400 billion as they're starting to start with in US money. That's how they had started their operations and business. And they are amongst the persons who actually producing oil, but their main value for their economy not oil, That is how not even 10% of their money come from what? Oil. The majority of their money come from tourism and business and economics. Right? That's a country that actually have seen amongst the Arab world that has actually used their wealth and expanded their knowledge, but they are also increased in the level of people coming there to work who may be going through difficulties as well, because they utilize them and abuse them and different types of things as that could happen like that. But what we are seeing here is that part of the world has transformed. Imagine if the rest of the Arab world starts to develop the wealth that they have and starts to utilize it like that, what will be the position and how they will be? It's as though you go to a part of the world and you ain't sure if you're in the Middle East. You ain't sure what part of the world is that. That in itself tells us that, that level of penetration and influencing is, what is happening within our community, and it's penetrating at a very fast rate. So what do we do? How do we stop it? And it's some very small, our kids are getting penetrated by this level of influence. It's not to say that we don't want them to have this influence, because the fact is that we live in a Western society and they will always have this. We cannot stop it. What is lacking here is the level of Islamic involvement and the level of Islam that is being introduced to our kids in a level that they can understand. No longer would a maktab system just of teaching them an Al-Qaeda is sufficient for them. It's sufficient. In other words, you can't take them back 30, 40 years ago education and say that system will work for children of our age. It's impossible. Because our children now require a greater level of interaction, and they want more excitement, and they see more things for excitement. So you come to class, and they might just sit down there and turn on a phone because you show them Aleph Bar, they want to see that right now. You have to teach them how to get something excited in technology to keep them aware of the senses. So, inshallah, the country will raise that point that the current, let's finish out on page this in the paragraph to close of this part here. The current world scenario plunges our youths into a world that is filled with the highest level of temptations and little knowledge of the reality after falling into these eye-catching desires and wants. This very condition that our youth face in the modern Western societies and Middle Eastern countries is causing them to be obliterated of their little knowledge and practice of Islam, as their minds are purged from Islam to a Western life filled with its own culture, politics, and moral teachings. That is what is happening to us. So, how much things you want to be attracted to, this or that. So, therefore, we have to find a way now to bring back our children online. Inshallah. So, we stop at that point today. Let's make dua. اللهم امين اللهم انت السلام ومنك السلام تبارك يا ذا الجلال والاكرام اللهم صل على سيدنا وشفيعنا وحبيبنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنه وفي الاخره حسنه وقنا عذاب النار سبحان ربك رب العزه عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
حور العين تناديني فدعيني أماه دعيني لتبكي دموعك يا أمي عن دربي لا لن تثنيني أماه طريقي قد وضحى والقلب يسير به فرحا حرب وجهاد متقد ودم بالعزة قد نضحا حور العين تناديني